We used your contractor's license and your credit to get the loan for your sister's studio, my mother said, sliding a piece of salmon onto her fork as if she had just mentioned the weather. 400,000. The SBA approved it last Tuesday. Isn't that wonderful news? The restaurant around me kept moving servers weaving between tables, jazz playing softly from a speaker above the bar, but everything in my immediate orbit went absolutely still. I set my wine glass down with more control than I felt. My younger sister, Brooke, was sitting across from me at the table my parents had chosen for this dinner, this ambush dressed up as a birthday celebration. She was already pulling up her mood board on her iPad, tilting the screen toward me with the wide, luminous eyes of someone who has never once been told no. It's going to be called Lumiere Studio, she said. Luxury interior design. I've already found the perfect space in Cherry Creek. Diana, you're going to love it. I looked at my father. He was cutting his chicken with the efficient patience of a man who had run construction crews for 30 years and had never once doubted his own authority. That loan is in my name, I said slowly. Your name and your license number? Yes. He didn't look up. You have a perfect credit score, and you've had your PE license for 4 years with 0 violations. The bank needed a licensed contractor attached to the entity. It's a formality, a business structure, a $400,000 formality, Diana. My mother's voice carried the gentle warning she'd been using on me since I was 8 years old, the tone that meant I was being difficult. Your sister has a real vision here. She has clients lined up, investors interested. She just needed a foundation to stand on. You have everything you need, a career, a salary, your savings, you're stable. Brooke is still building. I had been building since I was 17. I had earned my engineering degree on a full academic scholarship while working the closing shift at a hotel front desk 4 nights a week. I had passed my PE exam on the first attempt. I had spent 6 years at my firm in Denver, running structural analysis on projects that would outlast everyone at this table. My credit score of 812 was not a windfall. It was the result of a decade of paying every bill 3 days early. That loan is attached to my professional license, I said. If that business defaults, I don't just lose money. I lose the ability to practice engineering in this state. Do you understand that? My father finally looked at me. His eyes had a practiced calm that had always unnerved me more than anger would have. Brooke's studio isn't going to default, and if there are ever any issues, we'll handle it quietly, within the family. That's what families do. He picked up his glass. We did this for everyone's peace. We didn't want the next 5 years to be Brooke calling us every month asking for help. Now we have a solution. You should be proud of her. Brooke reached across the table and touched my hand. Once I'm established, I'll refinance everything into my own name. This is temporary. 6 months, maybe a year. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was 25 years old. She had changed her intended career 4 times in 3 years. Photographer, event planner, clothing boutique owner, and now interior designer. Every pivot had been funded without question. Every failure had been absorbed without consequence. I pulled my hand back. I want my name off that loan, I said. And off whatever entity you set up. I want it done by the end of this month. Or I'm going to the SBA myself. My mother's expression shifted in a way I had never seen before. Something cold moved behind her eyes. You would do that to your own sister? Over paperwork? It's not paperwork, Mom. It's my license. It's my entire career. My father leaned forward, and his voice dropped to something quieter and more dangerous than a shout. You have a project review coming up at your firm next quarter. Henderson Associates. I know 3 people on that board, Diana. I've done business with them for 15 years. Think very carefully before you decide to make this into a war, because I promise you, you will not win it. I stood up. I did not make a scene. I put my napkin on the table, picked up my purse, and walked out of the restaurant into the November air. I thought I had drawn a line. I thought the threat alone would force them to negotiate. I had spent 29 years understanding my family's appetites. I had not yet understood the full depth of their preparation. The first call came on a Wednesday morning, 11 days later. I was at my desk reviewing load calculations when my phone lit up with an unknown number. It was a collections firm. They were following up on a missed payment for a business line of credit in the amount of $42,000 attached to an LLC called Lumiere Design Group. The primary account holder was listed as Diana Mercer. I told them there had been an error and hung up. Then I pulled up the Colorado Secretary of State's business registry and searched my own name. There were 3 entities I had never heard of. Lumiere Design Group LLC, DM Contracting Solutions LLC, Mercer Property Holdings LLC. All registered within the past 14 months, all listing me as the registered agent or managing member. 2 of them had EIN numbers I had never applied for. I sat at my desk for a long time, the ventilation humming above me, my colleagues' keyboards clicking around me. I thought about calling my father. I decided not to. I called a business attorney instead. She reviewed the filings and told me, with the careful neutrality of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis, that whoever had set these up had used my personal information comprehensively and correctly. My SSN, my PE license number. In one case, a copy of my driver's license that appeared to have been scanned. The signatures on the formation documents were mine, or close enough to mine that distinguishing them would require a forensic examiner. "This is identity theft and fraud," she said. "And given the SBA loan, it's potentially federal. They're my parents," I said. There was a pause on the line. "That doesn't change what this is," she said. I hired her that afternoon. She sent a formal letter to my parents' home address, demanding that my name be removed from all entities and that the SBA loan be refinanced within 30 days. My father's response came faster than I expected. And it did not come through a lawyer. It came through my firm. I arrived at work the following Monday to find a calendar invitation from the managing partner. When I walked into the conference room, there were 2 people I didn't recognize sitting beside him. One was from the firm's outside counsel. The other, I would later learn, was from the Colorado State Board of Licensure for Engineers. There had been a complaint filed against my professional license. The complaint alleged that I had been operating an unlicensed side business, specifically that DM Contracting Solutions LLC had submitted 7 building permit applications in the past year using my PE license stamp on projects I had never reviewed, never visited, and never signed off on in any professional capacity. There were copies of the permits on the table. My stamp was on every one of them. "We're not making any accusations," the managing partner said, with the careful tone of a man who was absolutely making an accusation. "But given that your license is under review, we have an obligation to our clients and to our own liability exposure to place you on administrative leave while this is investigated. Paid leave. For now, we hope this is resolved quickly." I stared at the permits. My stamp. My license number. Projects in neighborhoods I had never driven through. "Someone used my credentials without my knowledge," I said. "My own family set up these companies using my identity." The board representative nodded in the way people nod when they are professionally required to appear neutral. "That will certainly be relevant to the investigation," he said. I walked out of that building at 10:15 on a Monday morning with a badge that no longer worked and a parking garage pass that had already been deactivated. Within a week, my credit score had dropped 61 points. 2 credit cards had been flagged for unusual activity. A lender I had been in early conversations with about a mortgage called to tell me that my file had been paused due to a change in my credit profile. Brooke posted on her Instagram the day her studio space officially opened for soft business. She was standing in the middle of a raw, beautiful loft in Cherry Creek, paint chips fanned out in one hand, beaming at the camera. The caption read, "Dreams don't wait for permission. So grateful for the family who believed in me first." It had 4,700 likes by nightfall. I saw the post from my apartment, sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of tea I had forgotten to drink. I had been on administrative leave for 9 days. I had filed a police report, which had been acknowledged and assigned a case number that felt like a polite way of being told to wait. My attorney had sent a second letter. My father had not responded to either. I called him that night. I don't know why. Some part of me still believed that if I showed him exactly what I could see, the permits, the LLCs, the loan, the board complaint, he would calculate that the risk was no longer worth it. "I know about the permit applications," I said when he answered. "I know DM Contracting Solutions has been stamping permits on projects I never touched. That's fraud, Dad. That's license fraud. Give me back my credentials, remove my name from every entity, and settle the loan." I'll sign whatever I need to sign. I will walk away. He was quiet for a moment. You want to know what I filed with the board this morning? He said. My stomach dropped. I submitted a statement from your mother and from Brooke's studio manager, confirming that you were an active, compensated participant in DM contracting, that you reviewed and approved those permits remotely, that you're now attempting to distance yourself from the business because of financial irregularities you created. His voice was smooth and unhurried, the voice of a man walking through a familiar room in the dark. I also have a CPA who has prepared an amended tax filing showing income from the contracting entity paid to your personal accounts. If you go to the SBA, to the board, or to the FBI, you are not the victim, Diana. You are the engineer who defrauded a federal loan program and misused her professional credentials. I have the paper trail to prove every word of it. I sat very still. I didn't build all of this in 3 weeks, he said. I built it over 14 months. Every company, every permit, every filing. You were always going to be the one holding the bag if this ever needed to be contained. That was the plan from the beginning. A pause. Now stop fighting and let your sister have her moment. We all benefit eventually. That's how family works. He hung up. I didn't move for a long time. The tea had gone completely cold. Outside my window, Denver hummed along in total indifference. I thought about my grandfather. He had been a civil engineer too, before he retired. He had taught me to read blueprints at his kitchen table when I was 12. He had driven me to my PE exam and waited in the parking lot for 3 hours with a thermos of coffee. When he died 18 months ago, he left me 2 things. A watch that I wore every day, and his old laptop that I had carried home from the estate sale and put in my closet because I wasn't ready to open it yet. I went to my closet. The laptop was a 12-year-old ThinkPad that took 4 minutes to boot. The password was my birthday, he had told me once, a long time ago, in case anything ever happened. I had never had a reason to use it until now. I went through his files slowly and without a clear idea of what I was looking for. Retirement photos, old project files, a folder of recipes he'd been collecting, and then, in a subdirectory labeled simply, For Your Information, a folder containing 47 emails he had printed to PDF and saved, spanning a period from 8 years ago to about 6 months before he died. He had been building a file. My grandfather had contracted my father's company to manage a commercial renovation on a property he owned in Fort Collins. The project had gone over budget by a significant margin, and when my grandfather began asking questions, the answers had never added up. He had quietly hired a forensic accountant who had found evidence that my father had been billing for materials never purchased, labor never performed, and subcontractors who didn't exist. My grandfather had confronted my father privately, and my father had made restitution quietly, partially, on the condition that my grandfather never discuss it. My grandfather had agreed, but he had kept every document, and the last file in the folder was a recording. It was a voice memo made on his phone, labeled with a date from 2 years before he died. The audio quality was imperfect but clear enough. My grandfather's voice, calm and deliberate. My father's voice, defensive at first, then placating. I need to know that Diana is protected from this, my grandfather said in the recording. Whatever you're building over there, her name stays out of it. Dad, relax. Diana doesn't even know we're having this conversation. That's not reassurance. That's the problem. There was a pause. Her credit is clean, my father said. Her license is spotless. That's worth something when you need to build a structure that can hold weight. I'd never let anything actually happen to her. You would, my grandfather said quietly. You already have, once, with the Fort Collins project. You let me carry it. You'll let her carry it too, when the time comes. That's who you are. My father didn't answer. I listened to the recording 3 times. Then I sat back, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than dread. My grandfather had known. He had seen exactly what my father was, and he had spent the last years of his life quietly assembling the documentation that might protect me from it. He hadn't told me, because he hadn't wanted to take this from me, the belief that my family was complicated but not criminal, but he had left me what I needed, in the one place my father would never think to look. I called my attorney at 7 the next morning. Then I spent the next 3 days doing something my father had never counted on. I stopped trying to negotiate and started building a case. I gave my attorney the laptop files. She contacted a forensic accountant who cross-referenced the permit applications with public records, confirming that the construction projects listed had no corresponding physical work. The addresses were either vacant lots, already completed buildings, or properties with no permitted work of any kind in the relevant timeframes. The permits were not just unauthorized. They were entirely fabricated. The SBA loan documentation showed that Lumiere Design Group had reported startup expenses and purchase orders that my attorney's team traced back to shell vendor accounts. The money hadn't bought inventory or furniture or design equipment. It had been moved through 2 intermediary accounts before landing in an operating account for my father's construction company, which had been bleeding cash for 3 years. The recording from my grandfather's phone, combined with the 14-month paper trail of my father's own meticulous preparation, did not just prove that I was a victim. It proved premeditation. It proved that my father had selected me as his instrument before Brooke had ever drawn her first mood board. I did not call my father. I did not call my mother. I did not let anyone in my family know what I had found. I filed everything through my attorney with the SBA Office of Inspector General and the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I submitted my grandfather's documentation to the Colorado State Board along with a formal rebuttal to the complaint against my license, and then I waited. With the practiced stillness of someone who had spent years learning to hold things together under pressure. The grand opening of Lumiere Studio was scheduled for a Thursday evening in February. My mother had organized it with the focused energy she brought to everything she cared about: a catered event, local press, real estate developers, a few minor Denver social figures. It was intended to be the moment where Brooke arrived, professionally and publicly, with my parents standing at the center of it all. I received a formal invitation in the mail. I imagine my mother sent it out of habit, or perhaps as a small act of triumph, the assumption that I had been sufficiently contained. I went. I wore the charcoal blazer I had bought myself after passing my PE exam. I had my grandfather's watch on my wrist. I walked through the front door of the Cherry Creek loft at 7:15 in the evening, when the room was full and warm, and the champagne was already in everyone's hands. Brooke saw me first. Her expression moved through welcome, confusion, and then a careful blankness that told me our mother had coached her for this possibility. "Deanna." She crossed the room toward me, her voice low. "You really shouldn't be here tonight." "I know," I said. "I wanted to come anyway." My mother appeared at Brooke's shoulder with the speed of a woman who had been watching the door. "This is a private event," she said softly. "For people who support this family." "I have always supported this family," I said. "I supported it with my credit score, my professional license, my federal loan eligibility, and about 14 months' worth of someone else's fraudulent permit applications. I think that earns me a glass of champagne." My father was there in 4 steps. He had the particular stillness of a man containing something large. "Leave," he said, barely above a whisper. "Right now, before I have you removed. The people doing the removing tonight aren't going to be on your payroll," I said. His eyes held mine for a moment, and I watched the first real uncertainty cross his face. Not much, just a flicker. But it was there. I walked to the presentation area at the back of the room, where a large monitor had been displaying Brooke's portfolio. I had spoken to the audio-visual technician 2 days earlier. He was a freelancer, and I had made it worth his time to give me 30 seconds of access. I picked up the wireless microphone from the podium. "I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate Lumiere Studio tonight," I said, loudly enough to stop conversations across the room. "My name is Diana Mercer. I'm a licensed professional engineer, and technically, I'm also the registered agent of 3 LLCs I didn't know existed until 5 weeks ago. I thought this would be a good opportunity to share some of the paperwork." The monitor behind me changed. I had not prepared a dramatic video. What I had prepared was cleaner than that, a PDF presentation of 12 documents, each one dated, each one showing my name and signature alongside my father's construction company records. The voice memo recording from my grandfather's phone played through the room's speaker system with quiet, damning clarity. "Her credit is clean. Her license is spotless. That's worth something when you need to build a structure that can hold weight." My father's voice. In his own words. My mother made a sound I had never heard her make before. My father moved toward me, and then stopped, because 3 people near the front entrance had shown their credentials to the event staff and were walking into the room. They were not local police. They were federal investigators, and they had been waiting outside for my signal, which my attorney had coordinated through the SBA OIG the previous afternoon. My father turned toward the back of the building. There were 2 more agents at the service entrance. He was a man who had spent 30 years knowing every exit in every room, and for the first time, someone had closed them all before he arrived. He was handcuffed in the middle of the open floor, in front of the catered trays and the portfolio prints and the people he had spent years impressing. My mother was led out through the front entrance, her coat half on, her composure finally and completely gone. The room was silent in the specific way that rooms go silent when everyone present is trying to decide whether what they are witnessing is real. Brooke was standing on the raised platform where she had been planning to give remarks. She looked very young. She looked, for the first time I could remember, genuinely lost, not performing distress, not calculating her next move, but actually unsure of where she was standing or what it meant. I had spent weeks being furious at her, standing in that room, watching her face. I found that the fury had run out before I expected it to. She had been handed things her entire life. She had never once been asked to look at the receipts. I walked to the platform. I took the champagne glass from her hand, which was shaking, and I set it down on the edge of the table beside her. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said quietly. "I'm doing this because it was done to me, and I am not going to carry it." She didn't say anything. "Get a lawyer," I said. "A real one. Not Dad's." I walked out of the building alone. The months that followed were not simple or clean in the way that justice looks when someone tells you about it later. There were depositions and board hearings and a reinstatement process for my license that required documentation I had to compile from memory and records in my attorney's files. There were nights when the adrenaline of the confrontation had burned off completely, and I was left with the plain fact that my parents had looked at my life the degree I had earned, the license I had spent years protecting, the credit score I had built dollar by dollar, and had decided it was a resource to be extracted. My father was charged with SBA loan fraud, wire fraud, and misuse of a professional license. My mother was charged as a co-conspirator. The entities my father had created were dissolved. The loan was recalled by the federal government, and the seized assets from my father's construction company were used in the restitution process. My license was formally reinstated with a public statement from the board confirming that all violations had been initiated by a third party without my knowledge or consent. I filed a wrongful action claim against my firm. They settled within 60 days. I used part of the settlement to cover the legal fees I had accumulated and put the rest toward what I had originally been saving for. Brooke was not charged. The investigation concluded that she had been a beneficiary of the fraud but had not been a directing participant. She lost the studio. She lost the brand. She lost the funding, and the Cherry Creek lease, and the carefully assembled image of a woman with a vision. Last I heard from a mutual acquaintance, she had moved back to the town where we grew up and was doing freelance staging work for a local real estate agent. I don't know if she understood what was used to build her dream. I don't know if she ever asked. I have not spoken to her since that night in February. I opened my own structural engineering consulting firm in April out of a small office in the Reno neighborhood with a window that faces the mountains on clear days. I named it Mercer Structural. I took on 3 projects in the first month, referred by colleagues who had watched the board reinstatement and drawn their own conclusions about what kind of engineer I was. On the wall beside my desk, I have framed the photo from my PE exam day, my grandfather and I, in the parking lot of the testing center, him holding the thermos, both of us squinting into the afternoon sun. He knew, even then, what I was going to need. He knew who was circling me. He left me everything I needed in a laptop in a closet, the way he always operated, quietly, precisely, and with a confidence in my ability to find it that I try, every day, to deserve. My parents are awaiting sentencing in a federal case that my father's attorney has been trying to delay for 8 months. The process is slow and administrative, and nothing like the clean arc of a story. That's how justice actually works, not in one night at a gallery opening, but in document after document, filed and reviewed and responded to over months of exhausting institutional time. But it moves. That's what I've learned. It is slow and imperfect, and it requires someone willing to do the work of building the case. And it moves. My father believed that stability was a weakness, that a person who had built something carefully, who had maintained their record, who had everything to lose, could be held in place by that very thing. He thought my clean hands were his leverage. He forgot that clean hands are also the ones that can pick up the evidence.